to comments. So those that are on right now, you can comment normally like you would on Facebook. On our end, we will just see Facebook user, but if you go to facebook.com/StreamYard, it'll allow you to have your own name and stuff on there so that way we can see who it is. Good evening to who Facebook user is right
Leia.
there. What's that?
It says Leia.
Oh, okay, Leia. So you can see who it is. I just can't see it on this end. How's everybody doing tonight? We've already started our drinking festivities. As you almost spill it. So who has some detection dog questions? Yes, I will be there in just another not even quite 2 weeks. A little faster than that. Well, we're up to 16, so that's good. Start firing your questions away. So who is that one? You have to tell us.
Does it say yet? Oh,
Brenda.
Hey,
What's
Brenda.
up, Brenda?
What odor do you normally start a narcotics detection dog on? Who's that from?
That is from Colton.
Okay, so typically we're going to start most dogs with, I'm going to say, is what the typical or strongest likelihood of a chemical they're going to find. So if their area is predominantly meth, we're going to start with meth just because that's going to be really good reinforcement history, and the prevalence of that first odor for the cognitive side of things is just a strong thing to start with. It doesn't make it necessarily totally better, but it allows us to have a stronger reinforcement history, especially in the beginning stages of detection. So if it's heroin, I'll start with heroin. If meth is strongest, and honestly these days it's mostly meth, so meth is the one we start with a lot, which some people go, wait, that's different. I usually would start with a very strong odor. Believe me, your dog can smell it. There's no doubt about that. So we just start with the goal in mind of what are they going to face the most frequently in that environment, and we start with that. So that's that question. What do you do with starting a green dog? Sniff and feed?
What? Oh, I'm sorry. Nope, you're good.
Okay. Sniff and feed with the odor. So if you go check out our YouTube channel, we have exactly how we start dogs. We do what we call odor pays, and we have our system there that shows basically the dog has a target location. We use delayed conditioning, which means when the dog comes into odor, while they're in odor, then reinforcement happens. That's different than simultaneous conditioning, where you are pairing your target with a your reward item. And I don't want, you got to ask yourself this question: do you want reward that leads to odor, or odor that leads to reward? And I want odor that leads to reward. So the training that we do is delayed conditioning. Dog comes into odor first, and then reinforcement happens while they're in odor, and we build out from there. And again, like I said, if you go to our YouTube channel, you'll see lots of those videos where we cover delayed conditioning, how we start, all that kind of good stuff. All right, I'll let you guys do the next one, which is...
Do dogs get tired of their reward toys? Should we switch them sometimes?
Go ahead.
So we typically will do what we call a toy hierarchy test. So we'll take several different toys that the dog might be interested in, or maybe that we want to use, and put them down and basically see what the dog picks. And I definitely find that with the younger dogs, they tend to have that change pretty frequently, especially as they're kind of developing. So we'll do that, especially for the younger dogs, pretty frequently. Did you want to add anything to that, Lily?
Sure, yeah. So essentially we're using a variable reward system once we have that hierarchy dialed in, which is different than the academic definitions of like a variable ratio or variable interval schedule. What the practitioners are referring to is just that we're simply switching up the reward types that we use in detection to keep the dog guessing. So sometimes it's praise, sometimes food, sometimes toy. And then again, understanding the hierarchy of their rewards for food and toys, we can channel that in their detection work.
Hi, Ryan.
There you go. I put your mic on mute for a second while she was talking.
Oh.
Okay. Aloha. Will you be in the Dallas area this year? Not till, I don't have anything scheduled at this point for Dallas. I'm already booked all the way till 2023 right now. We're starting to book dates into 2023. I have some meetings coming up with friends of mine, Simon, Michael Ellis, and so forth, Michael Kamichik from the Sheepdog Guardian, and we're setting schedules for joint training and seminars that'll start in 2023. So right now, nothing so far yet for Dallas. Doesn't mean we can't make it happen. Obviously, my schedule's booked, but any one of these two are usually available as well, depending on what you want to learn. But Natalie and Lily also travel, and they've been traveling quite a bit lately, because I know Lily and Natalie both just got back from Canada, but 2 separate trips. So our YouTube channel is just Ford Canine. Just look up Ford Canine and you'll get probably about 70 videos on there, to include the new podcasts that are also now recorded in video as well. All right, go to the next question.
Leia had a question. I hope I'm saying your name right. Do you prefer 1%er solid dogs over mediocre dogs when it comes to drive? Definitely, we're going to select dogs with genetics that are already kind of in our favor when we're looking at professional detection dogs. I think that sometimes, though, as you're developing a dog when they're young or when they're puppies, you don't really get a full feel for the dog that you have until you really get a little bit further along in your training. But there's definitely certain things that we're looking for in those young dogs that kind of tell us, okay, this is going in a good direction and we like the drive and all of that we're seeing, but you're still going to develop what's in front of you. So, sometimes we'll see a puppy and, maybe they go through a fear period, or they go through a period of the drive is not as strong as we want later on, and we're still going to work the dog in front of us and develop that and kind of see where it goes. But definitely, if you're trying to do a professional detection dog, you're going to pick genetics that are already going to kind of push everything in your favor, so that, all of your environmental stability and all that stuff is already kind of, your genetics are gearing you towards success with that.
And I would say if Lily wants to take the next question, which was the 3 trial one.
Sure. So especially if it's in a context like a lineup or something, we typically utilize food when we're doing rep over rep runs, and then jackpot the dog with the toy for our last rep, so that we get a more thoughtful dog that's more readily problem solving than if we were just using this very high arousal reinforcer like a toy rep over rep. I hope I hit your question there.
Yes, genetics play a major role. Those strong genetics help us with a really good outcome a lot of times, but genetics aren't the end all be all. There's always that good argument of nature versus nurture, and as we've seen a lot, there's a lot of things we can do nature that really helps along some things. I mean, if you look at the sport community, they do it with all kinds of dogs. It doesn't matter. It's not your typical detection dogs as you look at it as a breed discipline. But the genetics do definitely help, that's for sure. How important is foundational reinforcement? I'll let one of you guys do that one too, because that's right up your alley.
I don't quite understand what you mean by foundational reinforcement. Can you explain or elaborate, or if one of you guys want to jump in, if you have an idea of what that term is referring to?
Pete, are you referring to like the reinforcement history in your imprinting type stage, or we'll come back?
Yeah, we'll come back to it. Go ahead. And the next one is, any tips for detecting well-concealed narcotics? So that comes down to a threshold aspect. We teach and train dogs. That was actually part of the questions I posted to the Canines discussion group over the past couple of days, was about thresholds, and do we start low, do you start high, and there's advantages and disadvantages to both. But if I expect to find narcotics in a heavily concealed setup, I'm going to make sure I do have a dog who understands and is very proficient at very low odor thresholds, because most times that's what's going to happen. I also, at that same time, am proofing my dog to the various concealment methods and substances that I might encounter. So Something that's wrapped in layers and layers of cellophane, with then layers of mustard, then layers of cellophane, then layers of motor oil, then layers of cellophane and tape and so forth. I'm using all of those aspects as distractors, but because I've taught my dog also low odor thresholds, I have the probability that if that odor is present, the dog will tell me. And that's how I deal with concealed to get there. And the next one is, favorite breed for detection dogs, all three of you. I'll let you guys start. People know mine, so you guys go.
Lily? I love the pointing labs, the field trial lines. I think that they're quite versatile dogs, but honestly, I'll work any good dog in front of me, regardless of breed.
I would say, probably Cocker Spaniel, English Field Trial Cocker, and then second, probably Cocker Spaniel, and then 3, Cocker Spaniel. I really like the working Cockers. If I had to pick a second, it would probably be Lab, and then to go to more of the sport side dogs, and this isn't just because you're watching, Pete, but the Dachshunds are really, a lot of times, really awesome and just like really good. I just had one in the CSDT course, and little 10-month-old long-haired, and it was awesome. So, and they're just fun. But yeah, I really like the working Cockers for professional detection.
I was just going to say, you may have to kind of let people know the difference between Cocker Spaniel and then field Cocker Spaniels or Springer Spaniels.
Yeah, so if you're familiar with more of the show line or the conformation line, American or English Cockers, the working line Cockers are basically a different breed. The genetics are all geared towards field trial work, so they're really a pretty different dog, and honestly, I'm not super familiar with the conformation type dogs and their personalities, but the working line dogs are pretty serious when it comes to their drive, and those genetics for hunting are just great. I mean, you just plug in the odor that you're training on, and they're amazing at it. So I really enjoy them, and that's why I have little Alara from Rocky's Kennel that we use and get a lot of our Cockers from.
Shout out to Josh.
Shout out to Josh Riddle with Rocky's Kennel, but I really enjoy them.
I was gonna say too is they don't even look the same. Your field Cocker Spaniels
they
and
look,
Cocker Spaniels.
Yeah, like totally you really wouldn't recognize. Like if you saw us with a Lara and you're looking, you're thinking of a conformation Cocker. They pretty much don't look the same. I would say Franklin probably looks the closest to that, just because he still has a little bit of the longer ears and the little bit of a longer face. But genetically they're pretty different.
It's
dogs.
quite nice with the working lines. They require much less grooming than the conformation
Yeah,
lines.
that too.
Shorter ears, the red coat.
Yep. We could go back to Pete's question.
Oh, I'm going to answer this because somebody had to go real quick. So last question before they had to run, which was they're hearing about police canines doing more of the exterior sniffs than doing interior sniffs, and that's has to do a lot with safety aspect. Back when I was a cop, we didn't have fentanyl all over the place like they do now. So when it comes to doing detection or doing a deployment sniff on a vehicle, once the dog indicates, this is going to be agency dependent, but yes, you're right. A lot of agencies, once the dog is given an indication on the exterior of the vehicle, the dog is most times secured. The vehicle is then hand searched to ensure that you're obviously looking for not only what is possibly in there, but also the safety aspect before the option of redeploying the dog to the interior of the car. Once we've made the situation, that search area safe, there's nothing wrong with doing that. But what happens is a lot of handlers also get lazy based off of that. I put my dog inside, see what it finds. Nothing, in my opinion, can also beat a good hand search by the officers on scene, as well as utilizing that canine. But we can't just get into a car without the alert from the outside first. So once the indication happens on the exterior of the vehicle, then dog is usually secured. The vehicle is searched interior by the officers. If it's deemed safe and practical, by all means, you can deploy a dog back on the inside if you choose to. Go ahead, back to Pete's question.
So Pete was asking about how important the reinforcement history is in the early stages during imprinting and then ongoing training. I definitely think, anytime you are building a behavior, you need a strong reinforcement history on whatever that behavior is you're building. And then obviously also for us on the odor side, you're building a lot of reinforcement history and just some nice classical conditioning on that specific odor. So, I think that's really important in those initial stages, and then obviously ongoing, like you have to have something that's continuing to reinforce the response and also kind of keep your odor reinforcement history pretty strong. So yeah, I would say that's incredibly important.
Yeah. The who is the one that has hey Cameron Glad?
That is our Santiago.
Oh, Roberto. Hey Roberto, how's it going? Good seeing you. Or not seeing you, but I am on here, so yep. We had he was one of the ones I worked with down in Texas for one of the government contracting firms when I was down there in San Antonio for a couple of years. Probably I think it was like 3 years or 4 years, something like that. Yeah, the fentanyl is everywhere, that's for sure. I'll throw in a question that came in from Brenda this morning. Brenda wanted to know, do we start our dogs on Noda? And those that are watching who don't know what Noda is, Noda stands for Novel Odor Training Aid, formerly known in most circles as UDC, Universal Detection Calibrant. That is something that is a chemical made in a laboratory, does not exist anywhere in the environment, and it was designed at FIU, and then I believed purchased or now owned by a company that does electronic, like the electronic sniffers. So they use this as a calibrant to calibrate their machines to make sure it's working properly. So it was also something that we could use with dogs, but that company did not have any interest in producing it or providing it for canine. So in any case, moving forward now, numbers of years, Psy Canine has Noda, and it is moving forward with being more readily available for individuals such as myself who train detection dogs. And I don't know initially which way I want to take a dog. Murphy's Law always is, well, if I start a dog on narcotic odors, I'll get 10 phone calls for explosives. Or the other way around, I start a dog on explosives and I'll get 10 phone calls for narcotics. So what this does is you can safely train the dog on this chemical that exists nowhere in the environment, nowhere at all. It has to be made in a laboratory, and it's only made for this purpose. So it's not something that's going to be prevalent in the environment. So what we're able to do is train the dog on Noda, get the skills and the vocabulary of detection, as I call it, and as others call it, so that way the dog can understand what the game of detection is all about without being pigeonholed into, oh, this is, I'm stuck on narcotics or explosives, etc. So this is because, like I said, I don't know how much of it is readily available yet. I do know you can get what we call a handler kit of this, which is basically a get set tube with a tad infused with the Noda odor. So those that aren't looking to train a lot of dogs, you can train with this, and that way you don't have to do like I do, which is have a big kit that goes from 0.01, 1, 10, 100, whatever it is. Yeah. So we have a lot of different levels for us for what we do, and that's far more expensive. But with that said, that's a great tool that's going to be readily available here soon. If not, contact Michelle Mon. She has that for you. Next question is, what is more important, hunt or environmentals when selecting a new dog? Do any of you guys want to take that one, since you do lots of puppy raising now?
Yes.
Go
Both
ahead.
are important, right? I mean, if you don't have solid environmentals, then the work is really tricky. But also, if you don't have good hunt drive, hunt endurance, then you don't have a good detector dog. So hunt is something that we do actively develop in our dogs, but we're also selecting for dogs that have these innately strong hunt drives. But environmentals are certainly important as well. So yes to both.
You want to add anything to it, Natalie?
No, I mean, yeah, pretty much, if you don't have a solidly environmental dog, like even if they had really good hunt drive, but you can't take them into a chaotic environment, probably going to wash. So I would say environmentals, are really important. If you have solid environmentals, then even if the hunt is kind of there, but you do have to develop a little bit and it's a younger dog, we can probably, do some development with that and kind of see where we land. But if you don't have the environmentals, then maybe there's a couple jobs that the dog could do, but you're pretty much gonna be a wash at that point if you have a dog that's nervy.
Yeah, I was gonna say the number one thing that washes dogs out
Yeah.
is the environmental. So if I don't have environmental, I know we're behind the eight ball.
Yeah.
And there's, you know, depending on the environmental issue, it may or may not be something that we can truly fix. There's a lot of things that can cover up or help environmentals, but you can't fix it. You know?
Yeah, like once the dog is mature and your environmentals are not good, you're only going to do so much. And we're not trying to put a bunch of behavioral modification onto a dog that is supposed to be working detections.
Yeah, for sure. And, you know, we're pretty careful about, you know, we also don't push too hard. You know, we bring dogs, it's more about exposure. You know, we do obviously a lot of things, like they're out today with a couple of puppies over at Lowe's and someplace you guys went to, and got dogs exposed to different things, carts, people, noises, all that kind of stuff. I mean, we're lucky we live in Vegas, so there's a ton of environmental aspects that we can work through.
Yeah.
But it's more about, like you said, the exposure. We don't want to push too hard, things of that nature. But environmentals is super important. If I don't have the environmentals, I am kind of, there's only so much we can do.
Yeah.
You know, we have limitations for sure. Next question is, what are you feeding your dogs, and is there any food that you find that has an effect on olfaction, positive or negative? Nope, I can't think of anything that.
If there is a dog food that helps with olfaction, can you guys let us know?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I'm sure there'll be a company that will be like, guaranteed, you know, brand X is what we do. When it comes to the types of food that we feed, it really depends on how each dog is. You know, not every dog can eat the same food. Here we have multiple different foods, because like my dog Ammo, he has a very finicky gut.
Issue.
Yeah, he's got was it
Doggy IBS?
Yes, exactly. IBS is what I was thinking of. But no, so he's, you know, but for a while there he was like that, and now with that food we feed him, he's great. But the common ones that we use have been a Noshuk or Victor, to answer your question. Those have been the two that we've been working with the most as far as food types. And then within, I would say the Victor brand, there's a couple different types that we use, which is ocean fish to performance and so forth. On a Noshuk, what's the number we do? Is it, what is it, 26?
1620.
1620.
That's the one Noshuk that we do.
And then at what age would you start introducing odors to a detection dog for detection work, i.e. media detection? Age is relative. I do it when I see the dog's ready. There's various things that we do in what we call step 0. So we have 2 dogs right now that are 5 months old, and we've done 0 detection with them. We're just letting them be dogs, be puppies, go places. Yeah, developing our hunt drives. It's all part of, again, I keep calling it step 0 because there's no odor involved in that. That's why we call it step 0. It's all about developmental stuff. So we're doing place board for detection. We're doing the search and hunt games, the environmental conditioning, the play and communication aspects. We're building all of these things, as well as positional things. And those are happening now. But that's not any odor related type thing. So we introduce odor kind of when they're mature enough, and that does vary from dog to dog.
And I think, you know, because we're taking that time to do our step 0 where we're building out our hunt drive and we're checking how the environmentals are looking, and a lot of times they're still kind of at that developing age where, you know, we might be going through a fear period, or we're still kind of, you know, they're just maturing and becoming dogs. Like, we're not trying to rush them into, you know, this adult more type work when we start odor. But I think once we're really happy with how the hunt is looking, and we feel the environmentals are pretty solid, then we might start introducing some basic, you know, odor imprinting. And 2, I think, you know, we do a little bit of foundational stuff for what our indication is going to be. So we already have some foundations on that before the odor comes into the picture. But yeah, definitely dog dependent. I imagine with Ranger and Alara, it'll be at least another 2 months or so, and they're just barely 5 months now. We're just going to be turning 5 months, so maybe close to 7 months or so. But again, totally going to be dog dependent.
And if either one of you want to hit the building the search longevity, we'll let, since the quiet one over there has just been drinking away, Lily, we'll let her answer that question.
Sure. I mean, it's approximating just like any behavior, right? So you're just going to take it slow and approximate it up in terms of duration of search before they encounter their hides. And then also feeding in blanks to the equation will make for some nice contrast for the dog when they do come into odor. It also teaches them, that an all clear is a viable answer in the game. That's...
Okay, and then this one's for you, Natalie.
Okay, so Bianca said, my nosework dog on containers often alerts to the hide, but then moves on to searching all the other boxes before feeling confident enough to respond to the hide. He is lacking confidence, obviously, when not set up by me and all the other different factors. How can I improve his confidence? So, a lot of times I'll call those dogs the shopaholic dogs, but if your dog is actually giving you a full indication and then moving on, I would say if he goes in a full indication and you know that he's gonna try to move on to all your other boxes, I would try to pay that initial indication really well. And then if he needs to kind of search the rest of the space to feel comfortable, let him do that. Sometimes with our nosework dogs where they're not very confident, or we see obviously on the nosework side, we do have a lot of dogs that go through it. And I did that with my own rescue dogs that need confidence building, that, they kind of need that extra acclimation time sometimes to kind of settle into the search. And I think that's just kind of part of knowing your dog and feeling that out a little bit. But as far as confidence boosting, I would say, if your dog makes the correct selection and you know that their confidence is not the best, like pay that right away and make it a really big deal, and then bring them on to, something else that's reinforcing, not necessarily, food or toy, but if there's something else that they find reinforcing or that's going to make them more comfortable, like being able to finish checking out the space. A lot of times with those shopaholic dogs, we send them in a search and then they find the hide and tell us. And then we actually kind of end up punishing some of those dogs by saying, okay, you found it, now you're done, and now you're going to get put up. And that can actually really be a little punishing for some of those dogs if they have a really nice hunt drive and they do want to kind of check the rest of the space. They feel like they need to do that, and we don't allow them to do that. So sometimes I think that building in, you found it, yay, here's your reinforcer, now you get to keep searching, can actually be really valuable for some of those dogs. But totally dog dependent, but I would say if your dog is giving you an indication right off the bat, like make sure you're really acknowledging that and doing a high value reinforcer when you do get that initial indication, and then try to build out something else that you think that would be really reinforcing for the dog within that context.
And I can take the next question. How can one improve their timing when using a marker? We have a few games.
Oh, hold on. I can turn your microphone up. I had you turned down. Go ahead. Go for it again.
So the next question, how can one improve their timing when using a marker? We have a few fun games that we use with our handlers. One of them is just that the coach will have a tennis ball and you can throw it against a wall and ask your students to click when the ball hits the wall. So you're looking for a simultaneous sound. You can also change up the criteria there. So you are saying click at the apex of the toss. So toss the ball just up in the air and ask your students to click at the apex, or when the ball hits your hand. I particularly like that because I will miss the ball, right? So I'll toss the ball up. The criteria there is click when the ball hits my hand, and I'll let it intentionally drop and not hit my hand there. So they have to have this keen timing to also know when to withhold. So this sort of like go, no go procedure for the handlers. Another one amongst themselves is the shaping game, this hot and cold game that we use. So we put a bunch of different objects, maybe on a seat in front of them. We have our learner step out of the room, and we have the rest of the students come up with a goal behavior that we're going to be asking the human learner to learn just through a series of clicks or non-clicks, right? Hot or cold. And so it really emphasizes the idea that you need to have appropriate timing so that you're steering your learner in the right direction to build this behavior, this goal behavior. Another one that we really like to do, I call the bean counter game, and it's a pretty simple game, but it teaches a quiet body when you're issuing the mark and the importance of that. And essentially it's just quietly issuing your mark while your body is still, and then taking a piece of kibble and delivering it into a cup, or quietly issuing another marker and then retrieving your toy and presenting the toy, right? Because that's a very important part of the equation there, is that you're not doing a bunch of extra movements in your body to key your dog into your body position while you're trying to capture behavior.
And Lily, you should check your email apparently.
I guess. Who said that?
Tony.
So I wanted to add, you know, this actually dovetails right into another question that people are asking about, which is, I'll let Lily do this one because you actually gave a decent example of this. This isn't necessarily slowing down, but you did it about targeting, not being so pushy at odor at the recent seminar you just did over at Grassroots Canine. But the question, of course, is any tips to slow down a detection dog that was introduced to odors in high drive? So basically the dog was super stimulated. The dog now goes, I gotta go. And then their search isn't super effective. This may be also a great point where we can talk about the place board training that we're doing now that really helps calm dogs down prior to the search. We'll be having some videos and online classes that will incorporate what this is in our step 0, which is the use of a place board to actually help a dog settle and calm itself down, search better right from the start, and also how to have a more calm alert. But I thought it was great, something that you did in Canada, that you could kind of explain to them what that helps dogs be less pushy, what might also help them calm down too.
Sure. So this is a protocol that I learned from Simon Prinz that is just kind of genius. So essentially for a dog that's pretty pushy in their indication, not necessarily active in terms of overtly aggressing the odor with their paw or barking, but just nudging with their nose if you're asking for a quiet lockup, is having a big platform that you put maybe just a tin with odor on, right? And so the dog is allowed to push and nudge the odor and its indication until it falls off the platform. If it falls off the platform, the dog is reset. If the dog is pushing and indicating, that's all good, and they're reinforced. And then you approximate to smaller and smaller platforms. So you take a big space, then you take a smaller platform, same rules apply. The dog can push as much as they want in their indication prior to their lockup, but if they push the container off, then they get reset. Again, it's not any sort of harsh correction. It's just a neutral, nope, that wasn't it, and then reset, brief timeout, and then casting them back into the problem. And you, again, just approximate down in terms of the size of the platform to the point where it's just balancing on the tip of a cone, or in the case that I posted recently, balancing on the top of a solo cup. And that particular dog that I worked with at the seminar was brilliant and was issuing a lot of downward pressure to make sure he was keeping the shaker can pushed and mushed onto the cup. So it was a really elegant protocol. Another thing you can do is just work your positional arrays, so like a 3-position lineup, and use food. So you're creating a new context for odor work that's a little bit more collected with the dog, in terms of the reinforcement sequence that you're using to have that calmness bleed into the behavior itself, because your reward sequence can really color the quality of the behavior. And yeah, just in general, choosing your reinforcer strategically to tap into the arousal level you want to see in the dog. And then, as Cameron mentioned as well, using the platform work to encourage impulse control prior to coming into an odor problem, especially for those arrays or lineups. And in a sense, that's kind of drive capping, which is a hot button term here. Yep. But yeah, just encouraging this impulse control, calmer state of mind coming into the work, because they, as we're coming to understand, they don't need to be in an absolute frenzy coming into the work. They have all the drive there, and if you're encouraging this nice calm state of mind coming into the work, then you're not going to be doing some silly stuff like blowing your thresholds and all the other stuff that comes from really like jacking the dog up right before you start your search work.
Maybe some relaxation protocol.
Like place work.
The another one, I have people saying they can't find it on my Facebook page. If you remember, I have 2 Facebook pages. There's Cameron Ford Public Figure, and then there's Cameron Ford Normal. So you have to be, of course, friends on there, and it's showing up on there. We're actually looking at the feeds right now, so they're there. And what was that?
We were just giggling at Eric's.
Eric Ramos?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So anyway, Carol, she's not obviously on here, but if anybody knows Carol, her last name is BYGDNES. If you want to help her how to find this. She's not a member of the Talking Sense group, which is why she can't get on there either. Relaxation protocols, aka bourbon.
That's our relaxation protocol.
What do you think they're doing right now? Let's go to once you imprint the first odor, do you work in developing operational search with that odor before? So basically, they want to know, do we get that first odor, start training it in an operational environment before we add the second odor? And the answer is kind of yes. We get to what we call step 3. Step 3 is basic hides in like a real type environment, even though it's not real yet. We get the dog proficient at that. We see the dog is good, and then we'll go add the second odor and get to that same phase with that second odor before we add the third. And by that time, we are doing odor number 1 and typically odor 2. Once you get the first one, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever you go to goes really fast because the concepts and the vocabulary of that are all taught. The dog understands it and is good to go. So I hope that answers your question on that, which is we get to like I said, what we define as step 3, which is you're searching things like drawers. It's all simple stuff, but we're doing things like that in order to get the dog ready for the next odor that we'll do. Go ahead with a sport question, Natalie.
Let's see. Do you find that some sport dogs have an internal clock during searches? Absolutely. And I think that just kind of goes down to handlers accidentally creating a false belief in their dogs. So if your search is always, 2 minutes long and your dog is used to running into an odor, within a minute 30, then 3 minutes into the search, if the dog hasn't found anything, they're going to start panicking a little bit because, hey, I always find something by this time. And it's just that false belief that you have set up with the dog because that is what they've been shown and that's what the game is. That, hey, we're going to do, 3 minutes of searching and you're definitely going to have a hide, a minute and a half in. So I think that just kind of goes down to handlers not getting stuck constantly doing the same thing or constantly kind of setting up the same types of areas or searches for their training, and then building in those unproductive or blank areas so that the dog is comfortable with the idea that, hey, sometimes I'm searching and I'm not just coming into odor right away. I might have to search for 5 minutes. And obviously, you're going to build the dog up for that, going back to what Lily was saying about starting to expand your search duration. Like, that's another part that you train in is the actual duration aspect. So, that just becomes another factor that you address in training. And I think on the sport side, it's really nice for us to kind of overtrain that to a degree and get our dogs really comfortable with, working for 5 or 10 minutes with no odor. And then a trial becomes really simple and our dogs don't have this expectation of I'm always going to find something within an X amount of time. And also, I think it kind of, for us as a handler, gets us used to not finding something right away too. Because we have that internal clock too, right? Like, oh my God, my dog hasn't found anything and there's no way this is a blank area, right? So I think that it's dog and handler. It's good to just practice and to have that be a factor that you build out with your dog and purposely train, that your dog is really comfortable searching for 5 minutes and not coming into anything and not thinking that they're wrong because of that and having that internal clock pressure. And then when you're getting more trial prep ready, then obviously at that point you got to be practicing, your time management aspect because we do only have, typically 3 minutes for most of our levels. So, that's another aspect that kind of goes back into like trial prep, but definitely that should be an aspect that you train purposely in training.
Yeah. So another question is based off that post I had earlier last week, which was regarding lingering versus residual odor. Should we reward indication on residual and how it relates to vapor dogs? I mean, odor's odor. My dog's trained to detect the odor of X, whatever that is. We clearly know odor can be present despite a substance or amounts of substance present. Depending on what my job is, will dictate that reinforcement schedule. But how do you differentiate between low odor threshold or residual? And why would you reinforce one and not the other? And how do you know when it's blind to you? Your dog did what you trained it to do, which was tell you odor was there. But on situations when you know the answer, oh, well, I moved the thing, whatever the odor was, I shouldn't reward. If odor is present, why aren't we reinforcing that? Now, there may be situations where I wouldn't, depending on a discipline. But in most situations that I can think of, I want my dog to tell me if odor's present. Now, we can get into another question, which is, what's the difference in those that are watching? Maybe they know the answer. What's the difference between trace, residual, and lingering? I think these things get turned or tossed around quite a bit. People mean them to mean different things, but there is a difference between trace, residual, and lingering. And I'll break it down. So trace would be if I had, let's say, a bag of narcotics, it opened up and the narcotics kind of spilled on the table, and I just pick up the bag and try to wipe off the table, I'll have a significant, what we call trace. If I just had my bag of narcotics and there's a tiny, tiny little tear in the surface or whatever, and I pick that up, or let's just say I use something stickier. Let's use something like maybe a block of C4 or a Simtex, and that's sitting there, and I pick up that Simtex and I take it away. I've left residual. Residual and trace kind of are pretty close, but trace is considered higher than residual as far as the amount of substance left behind. Lingering is the vapor in that space that is still there that burns off much faster because it's a vapor. Dr. Paula Tiedemann shares a lot of this in her forensic lectures. But there's a difference. So as a dog handler, if substance is there at varying levels and I want my dog to indicate to me when odor's present, I want to know that. So I want my dog to tell me when odor's present. If I have a different type of odor or detection discipline where that's not relevant, then totally understand, and you'd have to train for something like that. But if, again, when we don't know the answer, we would want to reinforce that dog. Odor is there. Tell me it's there. That's reinforcing. That's important to know. So I won't go down any further on. There's more questions keep popping up. Let's see. Do you store your sport odors the same way you store your professional odors? Yes, we do. And I'll let Natalie describe that because she's also very much actually both of these ladies are very much a stickler about protocols for storage, cleaning, containment, all that kind of stuff. So go ahead, Natalie, and answer that question.
Yeah, we pretty much store all of our sport odors the same way we would handle a professional odor. Everything is in their separate ammo cans with multiple layers of containment. And I think for the sport odors, because we're dealing with that oil and it's so sticky and it gets on everything and contamination is so easy that, not to say it's more important because obviously we're just doing this for fun, like, you know, there's no lives on the line, right? But it's really important for our training to really keep that containment as clean as possible because those oils are so sticky and it's so easy to have contamination, particularly if you're training one of the venues where the threshold of odor is really high. So you're using a lot of oil because even with really well done and careful, contact with your training aids, it can still, you could still end up with contamination just because of how sticky those oils are. So yeah, really important to have good containment systems with those and use gloves and all that stuff and try to keep your stuff really clean and separate between your odors. And then obviously, Cameron talks about, we have like our imprinting stuff that we try to keep as pristine as possible because we really want to give the dog the cleanest picture of this is your target odor and there's nothing else, there's no noise associated with that. And then we might have more of a training context odor that is going to have some level of contamination, dog saliva or some old treats or some layers of different contamination that the dog is also seeing and starting to learn that, hey, even though there's these other things in my picture, the only relevant thing is my target odor. But yes, we store our sport odors the same way, and it's very important to have good handling when it comes to those sport odors if we want our training to be as clean as possible.
Odor hygiene is very important. Another aspect to you hit on there is having those different kits, the kits that are contaminated and dirty and all that kind of stuff, just so the dogs, because in the sport world I know they're going to face that, just like in the professional world they face all kinds of contaminants as well, but that's very important.
And I think with that goes back to just as important as it is on the professional side to try to utilize other people's training aids so that your dog, when your dog is a little more advanced, your dog sees all those different pictures. But on the sports side too, if your friend has a training aid and you're like, I don't know, you're not storing it very well, like if your dog is at a certain level, it might be good for them to see that picture and kind of understand that, hey, my target odor is there, even though there's all this other noise. But I would too, like if you're really getting ready for a trial, have clean odor, like use that imprinting kit so you're really showing your dog that the target source without a bunch of background noise. But
yeah, we want clarity in that beginning stage. This is the thing you're looking for, and later on as we progress, we want the various non-target mixtures in with that target odor, so that way they understand, despite that target odor being mixed with or confounded with a non-target chemical, it's still important to tell me that it's there. I want you to tell me it's there. So I have to have that clarity in the beginning, and then I can go crazy with my imagination of what I might encounter or deal with or find. So the next question, I know Natalie loves this one, but I'll let you or Lily answer this one, which is odor obedience. How to deal with multiple hides and your dog keeps going back to one hide. Thoughts? I know this one for sure.
Go for it, girl.
Yeah, so obviously really common in the sport world that we're going to have multiple hides out, and our dog, might work that one hide and then want to keep going back to it. Like I feel like shepherds are super prone to it. But I personally I always acknowledge that my dog has come across odor. So I'll say, yep, good job. That's your odor. But after I've done that initial reinforcement of marking and paying the odor, and we kind of move on from it to go work the rest of our space, if I see my dog start working that scent cone again, I will see that and then kind of make a productive presentation and get them moving beyond the area. But when that becomes really tricky, because now we have converging hides, right, at the higher levels, you have to be a little bit more thoughtful with that. And if my dog were to work all the way back to odor, I'm absolutely going to acknowledge that they're correct. I never want my dog to come into odor and be told nothing and just have them think like, oh, geez, was I wrong? I always want them to know, yep, that is your odor, you're correct, but I'm not going to pay you with my high-level reinforcer again. So I might just do like some praise, yay, good job, and then move on. But for the most part, I'm going to try to kind of prevent my dog from working back to that same hide.
You're in control. Control the dog.
Just with my handling. But on the sports side, it is hard because we do have those converging hides where we might have to really work pretty close within those areas. And it's not always super obvious that, oh, my dog's working back to that one we already found, or at those higher levels, right? Like at elite, do you really remember? Like, oh, for sure that's where it was. Like it could be hard to keep track. So I always acknowledge those additional, those refines, but I try not to make it as reinforcing if they were to go back to it a second time. And I think that's, can be kind of a controversial thing on the sport side because everyone has a different way of dealing with it. But I definitely want my dog to know, yes, that's correct, but I'm not going to pay you, with your toy again or whatever.
Yep. So let's see here. Next one. Lily, this one's totally for you. Sure. What's harder to train, handlers or dogs?
It depends on the dog sometimes.
Oh, hold on. I got to put your mic on. There you go. Sorry. You weren't.
Depends on the dog sometimes, but typically the handlers are the trickier part of the equation there, especially if we're trying to combat old habits. We use an indirect system, marker system. And so if our handlers are really accustomed to direct pay, then they're going to see the dog throw change of behavior, and that's going to be their signal to get that toy ready, because as soon as the dog is indicating they're, going to toss it in there to make the reward pop out of source, which is very counter to what we want to be doing in our marker system, which is keeping our body as quiet as possible to be able to isolate, the behavior of the dog. So that's something that I've encountered with our handlers before. But we also get, it's different when we're raising our puppies up, where we know, A to Z what this dog is like before we're handing them over to our handler versus some of the adult dogs that we're getting from our vendors and turning them around. We're having to untrain some tricky habits that they have. So it's just fun, challenging training pictures all around, whether it's a dog or a human learner for us, but very rewarding either way.
It's amazing sometimes how even the newest handler has the exact same bad habits as a handler that has been working a dog for a long time, such as reaching for the toy. That I thought initially was something that would be frequently or stronger with handlers that have been a handler before. But even people who've never touched a dog before detection have the exact same habit. And that's,
Everyone wants to try to be as ready as possible.
Yeah.
I want to pay my dog.
But that's what your marker's for, so you don't have to do that.
Exactly. When imprinting, is there a better choice than using DEA dope or explosives that, even though stored separately, may be contaminated from when they come from wherever they came from? Because we can't guarantee exactly how they were originally stored. I train exactly on what's given to me. I understand that there is no purity. There is no 100% pure. Everything has levels of contamination to it. So if I am going to go look for whether explosive, narcotic, whatever it is, I'm going to train my dog on the materials I have. My job after that, after the initial training on the odors I have, is to then expose my dog to other materials from other sources, so other training units, training programs, utilizing their training aids, make my dog's database of that target odor as diverse as possible. The problem right now, I'm going to do a video on this, when we get into synthetics or purity. Every chemist I know will tell you synthetics are something that we believe can work. Currently, right now, though, there's too many questions in play and not enough independent testing and verification of the ones that currently exist to say for sure what they are, how they work. And we can't just go off of, trust the dog made the association, because many times as I've looked at it, the associations that have been made haven't been done in a scientific protocol way, which is my example would be if I trained on a synthetic of some type, I would then do, once I was happy with where I was at training that, I would then do an odor recognition test. And in that odor recognition test lineup would be my, whatever that narcotic, let's say it's a narcotic. Let's say I trained on a synthetic cocaine and then I wanted to go see if my dog knew real cocaine. So what I would do to make sure that my dog knew this, or to truly know if my dog knew this, not just a contextual learning, means I trained on the synthetic, and then when I want to see, I do a odor recognition test lineup. So in that lineup would be maybe a canvas bag, maybe some silica, maybe rubber gloves, the cocaine that I had that was from its real source, wherever that's at, my evidence, DEA, etc., and then a blank can. And if the dog truly made the connection from synthetic to real, the dog would show interest on real, right? So what happens right now is our contextual or our statistical bias, which means I have said, I've trained my dog on whatever the chemical is, then I go put out the real, and the only thing in that space that's different or unique or special or salient is the narcotic training aid that I put out. So the dog makes the contextual generalization, this is different, whatever this is. And the handler goes, ooh, my dog's reacting to it. And either helps, or the dog may spontaneously generalize and say, well, I've been playing this game with you for a while. I'll give you an indication. So then that handler or trainer goes, oh, it works. This went for this, material that I used that was synthetic now means my dog found this over here, so it has to work. But it wasn't tested in a way that truly proved that did that work. And in the cases where that has happened, where there was testing done the way I described, did not meet with very successful results. Like I was saying, the other part that almost every chemist agrees with on the current market, there are numerous different synthetics that are out there. Very few offer exactly. There are some that offer what's in it and they'll give you a breakdown. There's other ones that don't. They don't say what it is or how it's made, and people will claim patent protection, and we have to be careful about that, because if it's patent protected, you can share it because it's patent protected. So just things to think about. So circling back to the question is, I'm going to train on what I'm going to go find. So if I'm training on explosives or DEA and our narcotics, I'm going to train on that and then diversify. My job as a handler is to diversify those materials to my dog that I know that have been tested and I know what's in them. Now, I know many handlers do not even know what's in their DEA dope. I can, I don't want to inundate Paula, Tiedemann with a bunch of people, but she will test your narcotics and tell you what's in them. And it costs you nothing more than shipping it to her. But I'm going to leave that alone because I don't want to hammer her with lots of emails going, Paula, test my stuff. Okay, next question. Can you explain the importance of conducting frequent ORTs for our canine teams and or double blind training? Double blind is testing, so I only do double blind when I see a team is ready to go through that. Basically, i.e. they're deploying or they are certified and going to be out there working. Then we'll do double blinds. And that's not something you have to do frequently, but you want to do it enough that you can see if there's any gaps in your training and you can address that. Back to that first part is, let's see, how often do we do the ORTs? It depends. It's a foundational thing for what we do in training here. So we more frequently do ORTs. Again, it depends on the kind of job you do. Bomb dogs, ATF, they do ORT every day. Other programs, every few months. I like to do it more frequently than that, and that's just me because you can work on so many good things on that fundamental step of an ORT, and I'll let you guys add anything to that you want to.
Sure, just like with any sensor that you're trying to calibrate, right? You want to make sure that your sensor is reporting and robust against distractions, that they're also able to report in all clear. And I think as soon as you're ready to do double blind, lean into that. There is some really nice pieces of technology coming out now that'll make it easier and easier for handlers to do so. But it's just very valuable data to obtain when you can train in that ORT context to understand where your dog is at and their understanding of the odor picture.
Which one?
Go ahead with the next one. The left-handed there.
Always runs counterclockwise. Is there a left side versus right side brain thing? Very oversimplification of what's going on upstairs in the brain.
Hit him with it, Lily. This is right up her alley.
So honestly, the answer is that this research, to my knowledge at least, simply hasn't been done in terms of associating, what's going on in terms of functional activity in the brain and, how the dog chooses to start its detection track there. There is some research leaning into the laterality or handedness of dogs, but again, those associations haven't been made necessarily about how the dog is starting to engage in that odor picture. More so, I would assume that it's just, reinforcement history and the method the dog has adapted to, or potentially like superstitious behavior and how the dog has, started their area hides or whatever specific patterns you're, working on with the dog, and then that, gains reinforcement history and patterns into how the dog works odor. Really interesting questions. Again, I'm not aware of the science that's answering these specific questions, but really interesting things to consider, and potentially, these insights can come online as the research is conducted.
Yeah, no, and those that want to see more about what she's talking about, Lily wrote a great article for our members on Ford Canine. If you're not a member, you can go there. Those articles are always archived. Now, I'll be the first to admit we've been slacking on our monthly newsletters for about the past 4 months. So with that said, we are working harder on that, but I've kind of, instead of those newsletters, we've been doing the YouTube videos, and I've been sharing those as kind of like those articles that we would have written would turn into videos, and that was just easier to do. So again, you can go to the Ford Canine YouTube channel and see a lot of those. Don't worry though, you'll be getting an email here shortly. We are vastly going back. We were working our tails off between seminars, dog schools, all kinds of stuff, and now we've had time to get back in. As you're seeing, lots of new lectures. I have 16 hours of video coming up for our online lectures and for those that want to see Dr. Nathan Hall, Dr. Paula Tiedemann, Simon Prinz, lots and lots of good stuff. So there's a lot coming out. Yes, Michelle, handlers and trainers often very much misinterpret the generalization aspect, thinking something works. And that's not just on that synthetic versus real aspect. It's a lot of things that get generalized as the dog knew this, and it was just a context generalization that was occurring. Any recommendations for a handler getting ready to select and train up their second dog? Well, for me, I want to make sure I have a dog who I know matches what I need. And that's an important thing, is get the dog you need, not the dog you want. I want a dog that fits and does well for the purpose of the work I'm going to do. So that can change depending on the discipline. I might like a certain dog. I might like a Labrador for one thing and maybe a Spaniel for another. I may like a very energetic dog for one thing and a very more calm, focused dog for another. So I guess it would have to depend on what your second dog is going to do. Obviously, being it's your second dog, you've kind of learned what you liked and didn't like from your first dog, so that way you can see what you would do on your second dog. Environmental is my big one. I don't want a dog who's overstimulated. Someone's at the front door, apparently.
It's Diego.
This dude comes over every time we're recording something. So anyway, you can go give him bed bugs that he wants, and then come back on here. But with that said, I want a dog that can do explosives. Okay, so I honestly, when it comes to explosives, I want a dog who's going to be a calmer dog. I don't need that spaz, because in most that you're doing explosives, you know it's going to be. Many times you search an ungodly area because you're the only bomb dog available to go do that. So they want a dog that can handle maybe entire parking garage or an event that was going on that you have to go search all that. So I don't want a dog who's a spaz case. I want a dog who's clear, who's motivated and alert, but not over threshold. I don't want to, in my training, step on that gas pedal so much that the dog I classic condition basically detection to be high energy, because that's counterproductive to what I really want a bomb dog to do. I need longevity. I need a dog that can work a longer period of time. And I need clarity in that work. You know, I want a dog who's not going to be nudgy and pushy at odor. That can be trained. That's not just necessarily a part of the aspect of because the dog is a spaz is going to do that. We can do things to help that. But overall, in general, that's what I'm looking for. I want clarity. I want a dog who's not hectic in this. So
Renee had asked a question.
Go ahead.
Odor volumes and thoughts on training protocols for sport preparation. So personally, when it comes to the sport side of things, I would say train to your venue. So if we have protocols that we know that our judges or our COs have to use in order to prepare their odor for sport. So we pretty much know what thresholds we're going to be seeing in trial. So I like to train my dogs specific to those thresholds. We're not like the professional side where we probably should be doing a ton of playing around with thresholds because that can lead to potentially some other issues and conflict for our dog. For example, on the, so like my main venue is NACSW, which is generally a much lower threshold of odor compared to say AKC, or I know some of the Canadian venues use a larger threshold of odor. So my NACSW dogs, I don't necessarily want them exposed to these really high levels of odor because I'm training generally on a lower threshold. So my dogs are going to respond to a very low threshold of odor, and that's something I train for. So if I'm doing AKC or one of these venues that uses a much higher threshold, my dog's chances of coming across residual or contamination and telling me, hey, I found this low threshold of odor, back to Cameron's point of, what's the difference between these different terms that we throw around. If I'm training my dog to tell me about a low threshold of odor, and then they come across a residual from, say, AKC, where we're using, maybe one drop of oil, I want my dog to say, hey, I found this low threshold of odor, but that can cause me issues if I'm trialing under AKC because of a contamination aspect with those, that high level of odor. So I think on the sports side, it's best to just kind of train to your venue and have a venue that is kind of your priority. And don't go crazy playing around with thresholds for our dogs, because, you know, we don't really need to necessarily, because we know what the thresholds are going to be that we're going to see. And I think our training time is kind of better spent developing other stuff that we know we're going to have to deal with in trial. So yeah, that's been a big question on the sport side, but I really think that threshold is something that train to what your dog's going to see in a trial.
Yeah, no, it's very important. Well, this next question, and I'll let everybody know this is like final call on questions. So if you have any questions, send them quickly because we are on limited time now. This is great for either one of you, I'll be honest. So any insight on limiting obedience with detection dogs? Obviously, the canine should be obedient to odor first and still be able to be manipulated and worked in conjunction with the handler. But I see a lot of handlers who seem to have trouble getting their dog to search independently, probably due to training shortcomings and possibly over-reliance on the handler. And I'll add, conflicting programs sometimes cause this too. So I toss it over to you guys for that one.
So I would say it depends on the dog, first of all. Some dogs, you know, you need to push that gas pedal. Some dogs, you need to push the brakes. It also depends on how you layer in the obedience, whether it's a ton of handler-focused obedience and control that way. I'm curious to hear your opinion on this, actually, Cameron.
Good.
You know, I do a little bit of competition obedience training with my dogs because they are sport dogs, and I definitely think it when you are, and this is obviously, you know, competition style, so it is very heavily handler oriented, and I'm, you know, building that into my obedience. And absolutely for my sport dogs, if I'm not careful or if they get a little stressed in training or trial, they might pop into, you know, a heel or something like that because there is that conflict and they know, hey, this is something that pays me really heavily, so I'm not sure what the answer is right now, so maybe I should try this. And obviously I don't want to see that in trial. But again, that's kind of a different style of obedience because I am training a lot of handler focus purposely versus, you know, a more, you know, day-to-day obedience where you're not necessarily looking for like this perfect head position or eye contact or whatever. So I think that if you train to a more, you know, a more operational type of obedience where you have the control that you need, but you're not necessarily building in a bunch of handler focus, that could be helpful. And then, you know, making sure that your stimulus control and stuff like that is as good as you can get it is another big aspect. Like, for example, right now I have little Alara, and I did start doing, like, I love training obedience, so I did start working just a little bit of obedience with her. And I'm training a sit indication later on, but I started working, you know, just my position, sit down, stand. And she loves down, and we don't have stimulus control yet. So when I try to work my sit for my indication that I'm building, she might try to lay down. So some of that stuff can be kind of conflicting, but again, it kind of goes back to how good you are at getting some nice stimulus control and building clarity into that obedience and making sure your dog really understands what context you're going to ask for some of those behaviors. But yeah, did you want to add, Cameron?
So you hit on a lot of it, but here's the biggest thing. Reinforcement history.
Yeah.
Is the reinforcement history heavily at the handler through the obedience for whatever reason you did it for? Also, the type or the way that you did the training, was the training, how many adversives were in it? You know, we get heavy into the term obedience when sometimes where we're only really referring to is control. I want handler control. And what we need is just a dog who's collaborative with us when it needs to be, can listen, I can stop it, direct it, do some things, but nothing over the top crazy. However, you might be doing a program where heavy collaboration between the handler and the dog is important. And there's been, let's say, I'll just use in the typical sport world, either a ring sport, maybe agility, where there's lots of handler collaboration and reinforcement and all of this. And then all of a sudden you go to detection and there's none of that. And you're just starting out.
Well,
so
there's not supposed to be.
Yeah. And the dog is trying to figure out what hat am I wearing today, and they can figure it out, but it takes time. If you've built a strong history of reinforcement to you or control to you or position to you, you're going to see dogs who struggle to go out or struggle to go hunt until you build a stronger reinforcement history to that, as well as cues that mean, hey, we're doing this game. Could be simply putting a harness on, could be a routine that you guys do, something that cues them into, hey, this is this game where you're going to go do this. That's helpful too. So these are things that typically why we see dogs who are very sticky to handler when it comes to the obedience aspect. And it's not just one thing or another. It's usually cumulative and then a reinforcement history as to why. And it's going to take us some time to build a new reinforcement history towards detection and moving out and moving forward. Do we see a conflict in sports, such as dog who learns to barn hunt and they're allowed to be aggressive towards the odor? Yeah. And which can be frowned upon and actually get you a fault in sport detection. Absolutely. This is something that does happen. It's also, again, what's intrinsically valuable to the dog. Wow. Hunting for a rat for certain dogs and certain breeds is extremely intrinsically valuable. Those dogs love it. So you're going to see things that get pulled out of the dog. And all of a sudden, when the context is pretty close to the same, you'll see things like just context generalization. Dog goes, well, I'm using my nose, I'm hunting, I'm doing this. Here's this thing. And then what really makes it worse is when you're slow to call alert, the dog goes, well, I also know this works. If I bite, dig, or grab, I can get this out. And then in the other context, that's allowed. The dog doesn't rationalize it's not allowed in this one. So you have to have clarity in training. And sometimes, because most sport people I know, you guys just do one sport typically, right?
That's it.
Just the one. So not like 6, where there's like 5 overlapping conflicts with some of the ones that are out there. And then they have to scratch their head. I don't know why this is happening.
Well, I always tell like my sport handlers, like we do all these other sports and we're like, pay attention to me, pay attention to me. How come you're not paying attention to me? And then they go into nose work and they're like, why are you paying attention to me? So there's definitely can be conflicts between those.
Yeah. If you guys really enjoyed this, let us know in the comments. Tell us if you want us to do this again. We will plan to do more. We also have ones that we have planned for our Ford Canine members, where we'll do some deeper dives on specific related topics, either with me, Natalie, or Lily. If you also want us to be part of your online or help you with training through online means, sending us videos, giving you pointers and tips, you can also contact us through the website to do that. I know all of us, more so Lily, or more so Natalie recently, doing lots of video reviews and Q&As and things like that. You've been doing a lot of video consultations, I should say, hopping on there for 45 minutes doing some video reviews. So if that's something you like, please contact us. The email is just info@fordcanine.com. So we thank you guys very much for sitting out here for the hour and 13 minutes with us. And if you guys, we'll see you guys again soon. Stay tuned for our next podcast coming out in a couple weeks. And there's a new video coming out on Friday on the Ford Canine YouTube channel. Stay tuned for that. Might be covering things like what books and videos are out there. Which ones did we like? Things like that. Okay, guys, we'll talk to you guys in the next one. And until then, it's okay to be nosy.